Despite what you may probably believe now, this actually isn't from the infamous parody directing team Jason Friedman and Aaron Saltzer. Shocking, I know. Yeah, they came up with the Starving Games, completely different movie.
Motherfucker. So here we are back where we started, with a terrible spoof of the Hunger Games. There are two of them. Yeah, there was apparently a lot of demand on the independent circuit for lowbrow parodies of that one movie that are full of pointless references to other movies. Seriously, why would you want to rip this off? Except this one is from the masters themselves, Jason Friedberg and Aaron Saltzer, the cinematic geniuses behind such masterpieces as Date Movie, Epic Movie, and who can forget the lowest rated movie on IMDb, Disaster Movie. And they'd grace our presence once again with the ultimate majesty that is number 49, The Starving Games, streaming for free on Plex. Back to the beginning. Full circle. But first we're going to talk about the Hunger Games, keeping up with the new traditions of the series and doing two movies. So yes, I was a fan of these when they were coming out. I read the books at a time when the first movie was already expected to be the next big young adult thing, but yet there was still enough time for me to read all books before the first movie came out. It came out in my senior year of high school and I kept seeing them through college, but this is my first time watching in a long time, and only the first one. So, the beginning of it all. Lionsgate purchased the rights to it. They had not made a profit in 5 years but saw so much potential in this property that they raided the budgets of other productions and sold assets until they were able to get a budget of $88 million. And they got tax breaks of $8 million for shooting in North Carolina. Gary Ross, director of Pleasantville, Seabiscuit, and future director of Ocean's 8, was informed of this production by his agent. He was familiar with the books because his children read them. After quickly reading the first book for himself, he decided he wanted the job, and he was considered along with many others and ultimately got the job. He wrote it along with Billy Ray, future writer of Captain Phillips, and the original book's author Suzanne Collins, who Ross had many conversations with about how to adapt it. They decided to stay faithful to the book and keep it mostly from her perspective to keep with the book's first-person view, but it also employed many scenes from outside that perspective to make things clearer for the audience, including the character of Seneca Crane, who was only mentioned in the later two books as having died after the events of the first one. Haley Steinfeld, Saoirse Ronan, Chloe Grace Moretz, and Shailene Woodley are among the many people who auditioned for the role of Katniss. The role instead went to Jennifer Lawrence, which the casting directors were enthusiastic about. Suzanne Collins was quoted saying that she was the only one who she felt truly captured the character. Though Lawrence was a fan of the book, she was reluctant to take the role. At the time, she was known for her work on the independent circuit, and she didn't know how taking such a big role would affect her career. It took her 3 days to accept the role. Ross also found the casting for Gale and Peeta to be very easy. John C. Reilly was considered for the role of Hamish before it went to Woody Harrelson. Ross offered Stanley Tucci the role of Caesar in an Italian restaurant in New York on New Year's Eve, and he accepted it immediately, having worked with Ross on The Tale of Despero. Donald Sutherland saw the script by accident and wanted to be involved, saying that it reminded him of Stanley Kubrick's Paths of Glory. IMDb says he got the role after writing Ross a letter petitioning to be cast as President Snow, but Wikipedia says he wrote the letter after being cast, and it described how much he felt the role meant to the narrative, and Ross was impressed with it and took some suggestions that he made. Either way, he was evidently passionate about this project. Lawrence, Josh Hutcherson, and Liam Hemsworth all dyed their hair for their roles. Lawrence underwent intense physical training including archery, rock and tree climbing, combat, running, parkour, and yoga. Olympic bronze medal winning archer Katuna Loria taught Lawrence how to shoot, and on the last day of training she ran into a wall at full speed. She was not injured. Anyway, on to my experience watching it again. When it began, I was surprised at how quiet and subtle it starts. Maybe I'm just so used to big movies being big, but I think that if one wasn't familiar with this movie, one could easily mistake it for an independent drama for the first half hour or so. Before we get to the extravagant capital city, of course. And before all the killing starts, of course. Although neither of those things really clash with the original vibe, though. The concept of the movie is simple. In a dystopian future, the government chooses random children to fight to the death on live TV. And the violence of this fight is shot realistically, with shaky cam that feels almost handheld and other things that make it look grittier. Shaky cam gets a lot of crap these days, but this is one of the times where it actually enhances the movie. They're not trying to amaze the audience with the action, but to make it look intense and almost horrifying. But the games don't even start until halfway through this 2.5-hour movie. But yet it doesn't feel slow. It feels perfectly paced the whole way through. It has enough story beforehand to justify this. In fact, the first half is as interesting if not more so than the actual games. Here the audience is shown a nightmare version of today's celebrity and reality TV culture. All the adoration and celebrity status given to scared kids who are going to either kill children or die horribly. Probably both. Now, this got a lot of hate because of the alleged similarities to the Japanese book and novel Battle Royale, with many people accusing it of being a ripoff, especially when it was popular. I'm going to call BS on that. I'm pretty sure the people making this argument haven't even seen both of them. It's just cool to hate on the popular thing. It's all basically because of the fact that they're both about children being forced to fight to the death. But really, that's about where the similarities end. Battle Royale did not invent the idea of the Battle Royale, but they're both about teenagers. Yes, because the Hunger Games books are aimed at teenagers. Battle Royale doesn't even have the TV and celebrity culture stuff, which I think is what really made the franchise. I'm not alone in this. Many people have analyzed it and rightfully found many works of art that it takes just as much inspiration from as it did Battle Royale. Jonathan Looms of the Oxford Student writes that many artists borrow from other properties and that Quentin Tarantino has built his entire career off of that. Quentin Tarantino also accused him of plagiarizing Battle Royale. Yeah, well, he's a pretentious ass. I'm not bitter, I'm just stating the facts. I love his movies, but he is a pretentious ass. You want to argue with me? Go watch any interview with him or anything where he has to talk for more than 5 seconds, look me in the eye and tell me I'm wrong. Dude, it was 2022. Nobody gives a shit about the Hunger Games anymore. Why don't you just shut up and try thinking of an original idea for once? But the movie isn't perfect. It still has plenty of that young adult novel cheese. All that love triangle melodrama. I saw Battle Royale on Netflix back when the Hunger Games was still big. I guess I was missing the satire of the Hunger Games, but I also think I preferred the battle scenes in Battle Royale. But really, this is the kind of thing that YA adaptations should strive to be. The plot is corny, but it has enough directorial and acting skill to sell it. And the satire, action, and tension could be enjoyed by people of any age. It's a bleak, dark addition to this subgenre with its concept and themes, but it's an interesting one. So I think Lionsgate might have made a slight profit this time. So this became a global phenomenon, grossing $694.4 million worldwide. Its opening day set records for a non-sequel film. In only 2 days, it became Lionsgate's highest-grossing movie ever, beating the record held by Fahrenheit 9/11. It was also the 16th highest opening day and 19th highest single-day grosses of all time. Highest opening for a movie released in spring until it was beaten by Batman v Superman, the third biggest movie of 2012, and the first movie since Avatar to stay at the top of the box office for 4 weeks in a row. It also broke Fandango's record for first-day advance ticket sales, which was originally held by the Twilight Saga Eclipse. In fact, it made up 83% of the ticket sales that day. The Taylor Swift song Safe and Sound, which was recorded for the soundtrack, was nominated for a Golden Globe. Lawrence won a Critics' Choice Award for Best Actress in an Action Movie, and the movie itself won Favorite Movie at the People's Choice Awards. However, it was not without its controversies. Wikipedia lists 3 of them. The first 2 are just some internet weirdos saying dumb shit, but the third appears to be an actual controversy for its depiction of violence, particularly towards children. In Britain, it was originally given their equivalent to the American R rating and had to cut out or alter 7 seconds of the movie to get their equivalent of a PG-13. Meanwhile, in Vietnam, its release was delayed indefinitely and then the movie was later banned altogether. But Hollywood still adapted the other 2 books, which had stories that were even less like Battle Royale. Catching Fire was also pretty good. It deals with the rebellion against the totalitarian government, and I personally like best when it's documenting the Hunger Games eating themselves. The last half or so starts out like the first movie, but faster, and with the audience in the Capitol starting to see this as more of a tragic affair. But then they made the decision to split the last book in 2, despite it not having that vast of a story and often being considered the weakest of the books. Harry Potter did it and it worked for them, but then the Hunger Games and presumably Twilight, I haven't seen any of those movies, did it because they knew it could make them more money. Ironic how I'm talking about this considering the last video I made I said that Spider-Man wasn't doing that. The first part I remember being kinda boring. The second part was okay, but a pretty big step down from the first 2. Also, it takes the bleakness and cranks it up past 11, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. And later this year, we're getting the prequel film, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Nobody gives a shit about the Hunger Games anymore. And, sure, I guess I'm probably still up for this. Anyway, isn't this franchise just ripe for parody? I can't wait to see what kind of amazing things Hollywood can think of to make fun of it. So there isn't a whole lot of info on this movie in particular, so why don't we talk about the infamous duo behind it, Jason Friedberg and Aaron Saltzer. Their big break was the 2000 movie Scary Movie. Sort of. It wasn't their first, though. Their first taste of the industry was writing 1996's Spy Hard, starring Leslie Nielsen and directed by Jason Friedberg's dad, Rick Friedberg, who was already an established filmmaker. Some might call Jason Friedberg a nepo baby, but there are 2 things to consider. One, Rick Friedberg was not that big. He directed 2 movies and a bunch of TV and short films. His son's probably more well known than him now. And second, the big one, this did not launch their careers. Since this movie, they've sold what they estimate to be almost 40 scripts, but the only one to actually be filmed was an uncredited rewrite of the Jean-Claude Van Damme film Maximum Risk. But then they launched their career on their own, with a script called Scream If You Know What I Did Last Halloween, soon to turn into Scary Movie. Although it wasn't so simple as that. And it's actually a little more scumbaggy than I thought before. The narrative I've heard sometime earlier was this. They wrote the script and it was picked up. The studio loved it, except for the everything. And they hired 4 more writers, including the Wayans brothers, to rewrite it until nothing remained of the original draft except the concept. Which definitely sucks for them, but at least that brought them attention, and they can market their future movies as from 2 of the 6 writers of Scary Movie, despite not actually having done anything that made it into the final movie. But apparently even that is a misconception. I saw their Wikipedia page contradicted that narrative, so the rest of this is from looking at more reliable sources, including part of an interview with the Wayans brothers themselves. What happened was that those other 4 writers were writing a script for Miramax, which was then called Last Summer I Screamed Because Halloween Fell on Friday the 13th. And while they were doing that, our heroes found out about it and decided, let's write another script like that, as in a script that parodies the same horror movies. Once again, their draft was called Scream If You Know What I Did Last Halloween. And so they put that on the market, and Miramax decided that they didn't want the kind of competition that would come if that movie got picked up, and brought it just so nobody else would. And once they started filming, Friedberg and Salza said, hold on, this looks pretty similar to our script. Allegedly, most of the writers have never even read that script. One of the Wayans brothers looked it over and said that it had nothing worth taking from, and that was that. And I believe them because it's Friedberg and Salza. Why would anyone take from them? Well, why would the writers of Scary Movie do it? To be fair, I did rewatch it recently, weeks before starting this video, and while I was watching it, I could still believe that Salza and Friedberg wrote the first draft. While it was definitely a Wayans brothers movie through and through, it still had some of their type of humor. I mean, how could you look at the Matrix sequence near the end or the Blair Witch scene and not think, maybe Salza and Friedberg had something to do with this? But then again, why would they steal that when the rest of the script has better gags in it, from a script that was written solely to rip them off? But the WGA ruled that the final script might have taken influence and they had to be credited. And that brought them attention, and they can market their future movies as from 2 of the 6 writers of Scary Movie, despite probably not doing anything for the movie at all. Tip for up-and-coming filmmakers: rip people off and lie about it, and then you'll be successful. Allegedly. And after some more time of not being able to get directors for their scripts, they decided to start directing the movies themselves, and gave us some parody films that were all financially successful despite many people ranking them among the worst movies ever made. The highest Rotten Tomatoes score they ever got was for a movie they didn't even write. Allegedly. It got 51%. Their second highest has 8%. Which brings us to the Starving Games. I'm guessing the major studios had decided they didn't want this kind of critical attention by now because this one was released independently, in theaters and video on demand at the same time by the distribution startup Ketchup Entertainment, a studio so small that they don't even have a Wikipedia page. Released in 2013, a couple weeks before Catching Fire hit theaters, and it became the duo's first box office bomb. Now, I'm somewhat familiar with their work. I've seen Epic Movie as a kid, and I've seen parts of Disaster and Date Movie on TV, so if they are what I remember them to be, then this one at least shows some growth from them as artists. The main complaint with them is that they put too many soon-to-be dated references in their movies and try to pass them off as jokes despite not actually having any punchlines. And what I saw in those others is wall-to-wall appearances from other characters and properties. Well, here they at least spend most of the movie sticking to one property, The Hunger Games. It follows the plot of it very closely, and there are times where it feels like it's actually subverting or making fun of elements of it, like turning Peeta, the love interest, into a stalker, or a joke explaining why the people in the Capitol dress so weird. Or even something like what they do in this one scene at the beginning of the first where Gail brings Katniss bread and she excitedly asks, "Is this real?" What they do here is have the movie be snarky and say, "No, it's one of those fake breads." Or when they actually try to take elements further, like the over-the-top deaths at the beginning of the game, or doubling down on the TV element, including interrupting the games for a halftime show. Not all of these are funny, but they at least feel like an actual parody. But then they have their references at times, and it's painfully not funny. But at the very least, now the movie's only slightly dated. How is it that this feels less Friedberg and Salza than the Hunger Games parody that they didn't make? Most confoundingly, how is that one still better than this? I mean, that wasn't something I decided on immediately. For like maybe the first half I was thinking it was still better than the Hungover Games, possibly a 2-star compared to that one's 1-star. But then as it went on I was starting to realize just how much the references outweighed everything. They only happen occasionally, but their badness is far more memorable than every other scene here. Plus the Hungover Games had boobs everywhere. But seriously, why is the one that has wall-to-wall references better than the one that has only occasional references? Probably a major factor is that the Hungover games actually turn these references into actual characters, not just something that just gets brought up once and then never again without an actual joke. Which also helps to make it feel more chaotic in an entertaining way. Making the contestants from different properties seems like the way to go for this kind of comedy, yet at the same time it's so Friedberg and Salzer that I'm genuinely surprised that they didn't go with it. And they probably should have. That might not have made it better, but it would have made it a lot more entertaining. I can't believe I'm actually knocking a movie by these people for not making the same mistakes that Epic Movie did. But here, instead of that, we have things like, hey, what if Katniss was attacked by angry birds, which could lead to her playing Fruit Ninja, and then she could stomp the annoying orange. Many of the references are only there for the sake of recognition. Here's a sample of this genius humor. A character shoots an arrow, then we cut to a Psy impersonator doing the Gangnam Style dance for 5 seconds, and then he gets hit by an arrow and dies. That's the whole joke. And then there's a scene where Gandalf and some other guy from the Lord of the Rings are caught trying to get with the main couple while they're having sex. What is even the connection? You could have literally picked any character from anything and it would have made no less sense. Or there are others that could actually fall into the less unfunny end of the spectrum if it wasn't a reference. Like the appearance of the band LMFAO, impersonators of course. They show up on the field at the beginning of the game saying that they got lost on the way to perform at a watch party or something, and then once they realize where they are, they just casually walk away and immediately step onto a landmine. I'm not saying this would be hilarious if it was just some random guy, but it would at least be tolerable. Like, why even make fun of LMFAO? Look at these guys. Seriously, just look at them and tell me that you think they aren't in on the joke. Listen to Sexy and I Know It and tell me that there isn't any joke worth making about it that they haven't already made. They're literally called LMFAO. You may as well try to parody Epic Movie. Or Monty Python. Wait, they parody Monty Python? How did I even miss that? And even the jokes that I had faint praise for go into unfunny directions. Like the halftime show, which starts out with a cheerleading dance. But then the game master decides that it needs to be sexier. Hey, he should have written for the Hungover games. And he does that by pushing a button that makes her breasts... No, they don't get bigger, they just have weird rods coming out of their nipples now. Is that what other guys like in a woman? Maybe he shouldn't write for the Hungover games. Ladies and gentlemen, the PG-13 version of sex appeal. And these jokes probably only make fun of the Hunger Games by accident. Most of the jokes are just bottom of the barrel shit. Like when the government official draws names for who has to be in the games and she keeps pulling out fake names like Hugh Janus or something and the audience laughs. I was certain that it was going to pay off when she picks up an actual name and thinks it's fake because every name in the book sounds stupid. But that never happened. There's no punchline beyond the funny names. Although to be fair, that joke might be more difficult to do when the names have been changed to things like Can't Miss Evershot. Also, the plot is basically the same as the original movie and yet they still manage to mess up the continuity. Namely with Peeta's feelings for Katniss, or Can't Miss, whatever, and Peter. It's established early on that he's in love with her, and then halfway through there's a scene where it seems like he's going to confess his love, but he actually says he's in love with some random male tribute. And then it's never mentioned again. And suddenly Peter's straight again and in love with Can't Miss, and everybody watching this knows despite him never saying anything about it. Okay, in all fairness, I should probably bring up one thing that this movie did better than the Hungover games. The commentary from the sportscasters was better in this film. The black one, who is a member of the games and stays completely stern throughout, is probably the funniest character of this unfunny movie. Who would have guessed somebody would improve on the iconic comedy stylings of Caitlyn Jenner? Or Bruce Jenner at the time. I'm not sure what to call her here. Also, the Hungover games was revealed to be a dream at the end, so fuck that movie for that. Oh, and for anybody who says these kinds of spoof movies don't age well, here's something that has gotten more funny with age. Just not intentionally. So the Avengers show up at the end because, why not? There are appearances in all the trailers and even the poster, but they don't even appear until the last scene. The trailers literally show the very end of the movie. And then, this happens.
Shut your ass, Hawkeye. You're lucky you even in the Avengers. Yeah. And don't you think for one goddamn minute that Marvel is gonna spin off your character. Hawkeye, Cola. The Avenger nobody gives a shit about will definitely not be coming soon to a theater near you!
I mean, technically it didn't go to theaters. Okay, this movie's so stupid it's got to be hiding some genius somewhere. So I've decided to overanalyze and bullshit my way through the rest of this review. Yes, you see, this is actually a deep critique of capitalism and the futility of revolution. So deep it's brilliant, and I'm going to spell it out for you people who are less smart than me. The Game Master's beard is shaded into numerous corporate logos throughout. This may seem like they're just doing shit because you'll recognize it and laugh, but you see, only a smart person like myself can tell that it's linking the Hunger Games to American capitalism and how it frequently kidnaps your children and forces them to fight to the death on live TV. It subverts the symbol of the Mockingjay, which in the books and movies is used by the Resistance as a symbol for revolution. When we first see that, the Mockingjay pin has a chicken on it, and when Katniss gives it to her sister, saying that nothing bad will happen to her as long as she has it, the pin pierces her sister's hand, and then she runs into a wall. Later, a Mockingjay shits on Katniss's face, because once again, revolution is futile in today's world. Katniss becomes a revolutionary symbol, and the Capitol cashes in on that by making merchandise with her face on it. And even when she does inspire revolution, the lower class can't even bring themselves to act on it. In one scene, the crowd at District 12 sees her actions and considers rioting, but then a burger commercial comes on, an exaggerated version of those Carl's Jr. or Hardee's ads that show a horrifically greasy and unhealthy burger, and blow it up to the point where it just looks like the most disgusting thing in the universe, despite the fact that they actually make some good burgers. The ad just keeps piling gross stuff on that burger that does not go well together, and the crowd is so entranced by this horrifically gruesome display of commercialism and excess that they cannot revolt. This represents how people want to change the world, but only if they don't have to give up the comforts that world can give them. In the end, Katniss is given the chance to sacrifice herself along with Peter so that the games do not have a victor, so they can stick it to the government. But in the end, even this revolutionary figure cannot bring herself to sacrifice anything for the revolution, and instead kills Peter and wins. And the system wins. And one of the last things we hear of the outside world is the president of this totalitarian regime crying out, "Best starving games ever!" And, okay, this is actually starting to make sense now. And then, at the very end, the Avengers show up to bring Katniss to the Avengers Initiative and potentially start an endless franchise. But then they are immediately blown up. The directors are finally putting an end to the corporate greed of the industry by actually doing something. And after all that, we're at the 71-minute mark, but the movie is 81 minutes, so they fill it up with a blooper reel before the credits. Some of lower intellect may just think this was a half-assed way to get the movie to feature length, but it was actually a neo-surrealist attack on the concept of the standard film formula. By having a film where almost an eighth of it is bloopers and credits, they are sticking it to the man who says you can't have such a short movie, or that you can't take credit for a movie you had no part in, but they don't listen to your rules. Allegedly. So, in conclusion, Friedberg and Seltzer are the greatest countercultural independent filmmakers of all time. But seriously, this movie is worse than the Hungover Games. It may show improvement from the duo, but it could also just be me remembering there are other movies to be worse than they really are. Maybe it can fall into guilty pleasure for me, but if Epic Movie was as crazy as I remember, this would be a lot less of a guilty pleasure than that. At least this one could have probably been rewritten into something decent, like I thought Scary Movie was. Like, they wouldn't even have to take out half the jokes. But they'd still have more luck riding the coattails of some other, better Hunger Games parody again. Allegedly. Yeah, I'm saying only slightly worse than the Hungover Games here.